Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Campus Technology presentation. My name is Linda Briggs. I'm a contributing editor for Campus Technology, and I'll be your moderator today. Our event is titled Vanderbilt and Google, Innovating Communication in Education. It's sponsored by Google, and thank you for joining us today. We have a very good presentation lined up for you. We're going to talk about how Vanderbilt University has replaced their legacy open source student email system with Google Apps for Education. Among its many benefits, the university saved some $750,000 on storage costs alone. We're certainly going to talk about how they did that. We have a very good speaker here from Vanderbilt to tell you about it, along with speakers from Google to explain Google Apps for Education and to answer your questions. So we're glad you could join us. It's going to be an interesting hour. Let me go through just a few background items with the audience before we get started. We are recording today's broadcast, and it will be available on demand after today's event. We'll send you an email in the next 24 hours with a link to that archive, so you can listen to it again, or you can share that link with colleagues if you'd like to do that, and we encourage you to. If you run into any trouble during the event, your slides aren't advancing, or you have problems with audio, first of all, please disable your pop-up blockers for the event. That seems to interfere with the presentation management system. Also, it often helps to close and reopen your console or to press Control F5 to refresh your screen. This is an interactive event, and we encourage you to participate by submitting your questions or comments. Use the chat box there on your console. Send them over at any time during the event. We're going to answer questions from the audience in the final portion of today's presentations. And if you have additional questions or you run into some problems I haven't covered here, just click on the Help button there on your console, and we'll get you some technical assistance. Okay, on to our agenda for today. After this brief introduction, we're going to hear from the folks from Google with an overview of Google Enterprise. And then we're going to hear from our Vanderbilt University speaker with a case study. And finally, as I said, we'll wrap up with a Q&A session and conclusion. And do send your questions over for that Q&A session. We've got a number of good presenters today. Joining us from Vanderbilt University is Matt Hall. Matthew Jett Hall is the Associate Vice Chancellor for Information Technology Services. He's also Associate Chief Information Architect for Enterprise Infrastructure, Associate Professor of the Practice of Computer Science, and a Faculty Fellow in the English Department at Vanderbilt. He looks after the organization's electronic messaging, collaboration, end-user services, information protection, operator services, application hosting, identity management, network data, and telecommunications services. In addition to his operating roles in this capacity, he coordinates enterprise IT architecture processes with members of the research, clinical enterprise, and teaching communities. Matt assumed his appointment in April 2004. He earned his master's degree in international affairs from Florida State University in 1992. And Matt also holds Six Sigma Green Belt certification, computer hacking forensic investigator certification, and his executive education is from the Wharton School of Business. Joining Matt today from Google is Vijay Kuduri. Vijay is a product marketing manager at Google Enterprise, focusing on the enterprise search product line. He brings over 15 years of experience in product marketing, marketing strategy, and business development. Vijay holds an MBA from the University of Michigan and a bachelor's in electrical engineering from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Also from Google, we have Stephen Fang, a Google Apps associate for Google Enterprise. Stephen graduated from Dartmouth College and recently joined the Google Apps Education Edition team. Since joining the team, he has worked with schools like Marshall University, Morehouse College, and the University of Rhode Island to get up and running with Google Apps. So we welcome all three of those speakers. Wonderful to have all of you here with us today. Just a couple words on who we are before we move along. Most or all of you are familiar with our magazine and website, campustechnology.com. Our annual conference, again, is in Boston, Massachusetts in July this year. And our email newsletters. Some of them are listed here. You can get information on a variety of topics on technology and higher education delivered right into your email inbox. Also, we encourage you to join us on either Facebook or Twitter or both. Our sponsor today, as I said, is Google. Here's Google's rather well-known mission statement. Really can't say it better than that. Google's mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And on that note, let me turn things over to our speakers today. Matt Hall with Vanderbilt University, Vijay Kaduri with Google, and Stephen Fang with Google. Vijay, I believe I'm turning it over to you at this point.
Actually, this is Stephen, and I'm going to be the first speaker today.
Oh, I'm sorry. Welcome, Stephen.
So I'm just going to give a brief overview of what Google Enterprise and Google Apps is. So our first slide. So Google's mission, as was just mentioned, is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. So you can see this through Google.com as well as some of our other products that I'm sure a lot of you use. But what's different about Google Enterprise is we're basically developing a user-centric technology for businesses. We have over 1,000 people dedicated to the enterprise business, active search customers, lots of businesses using Google Apps, and right now, actually, we just announced we have over 8 million active students using Google Apps. So part of Google Apps is Google Apps is a suite of tools used for collaboration in many different environments. And this includes Gmail, Groups, Talk, Calendar, Docs, Sites, Video, Post-it for message archiving and discovery. And we recently also just announced that you're going to be able to sync up with all the other consumer products such as Blogger and Picasa and those things. Those are all going to be part of the Google Apps suite of tools. And what we see with Google Apps Google Apps is that with Google Apps, you kind of move away from all the other technology challenges that you used to face. So we integrated mobile devices. You no longer need mobile servers or spam filters or storage systems, directory servers, any of those security systems, backup servers, all those things, when moved to Google Apps, Google takes care of. And your information is actually hosted by Google. And it's actually, with Google Apps, you can actually overcome a lot of the collaboration challenges. So for this slide, you can see that in the old model of doing things, if you had one document that you wanted to collaborate on, and you wanted to send to 4 different people, if you sent to Jesse, Sally, Casey, and Rachel, they would edit it and send it back to you for version 2. So you would have version 2, you would work on it, compile their thoughts, and send it out again to Jesse, Sally, and Casey for version 2. And then if Rachel came back and she forgot to send you version 1, at the end, you kind of had to compile version 2 and version 1. And that kind of causes a lot of collaboration challenges. But with Google Docs or Google Apps Education Edition, you actually, moving forward, will always be using the most recent document. So people would always collaborate on the most recent document. And then talking about a little bit about our infrastructure, it's actually built on the cloud computing model. So you're able to access your information from any laptop, any netbook, any mobile device. Your information is stored basically in the cloud, and you're able to access that information, which is yours, from any device. So you don't need to be tied to a specific desktop or laptop or some other specific computer where your data is held. And we know that in education, there's definitely a lot of information overload. You have to worry about quotas for your students and faculty and staff. And the way we handle that is we give you plenty of storage with Google Apps Education Edition. Labels and threading kind of help so that you don't have cluttered inboxes. Collaboration is crucial, so we provide docs and sites and video for those collaborations to happen. And once again, you can access your information from anywhere. So any laptop, any mobile device, really anything that has internet. And of course, things are always getting better. So last year, we released over 116 notable releases, and this year we're planning on even more. So uploading file type, anonymous editing, Wave, all those things, we're constantly keep improving and upping the speed of innovation. And then the next thing you'll see is that Google Apps Education Edition is very secure and reliable. We do have SAS-70 Type 2 certification. We are in progress of getting business certification. We are world-class security experts in terms of how the Google file system is, as well as our servers. So we guarantee a 99.9% uptime, better uptime than on-premise servers. And then basically talking a little bit about our servers, our infrastructure is made up of massive data servers built on scalability, security, and efficiency in a way that individual businesses or schools really can't create. We run our servers, we run Google.com, we run plenty of information, and all those things are built on our massive data centers. So we are essentially becoming your IT environment. And now I'm actually going to turn it over to Vijay Karduri, the Senior Product Marketing Manager, to talk a little about Google Enterprise Search.
Great. Thanks so much, Stephen, and thanks to all of you for joining today. So I am excited to talk a little bit about search and give you a little bit of background. A lot of you might be using Google and online, and Google really has become, or I should say search has become really the primary interface to access information online. A lot of you may not even realize some of the things that are behind that Google search box on the web. If you can see the tiny boxes on the right-hand side of your screen, for instance, you'll see you could type in movies and a zip code and you'll actually get instant show times, or you can type in weather in a city and you'll actually get weather maps. So through the simple search box, we can actually access a lot of different back-end information systems and provide them to you in a readily displayable format. It's the same concept that we're trying to really bring to educational institutions, to really make information readily accessible through a simple search box. So when you think about your university, obviously you have information on both sides of the firewall. So internally, you might have a lot of professors publishing research information. You might have a lot of administrative documents. Your financial teams have all the financial systems, and we deal with universities with lots and lots of campuses. One of our customers, for instance, California State, has 23 campuses, and they have this challenge of how do you aggregate information from across so many different campuses. And it's really a challenge because systems integration can get really expensive. So you don't want to have to build separate applications to tie all this information together. And on the website, a lot of universities have all sorts of people coming to their website, whether it's students trying to access the latest coursework, whether it's visitors or alumni or prospective students trying to access specific information. So university websites really need to have lots and lots of different sections, and it may not be the easiest thing to navigate through all those sections depending on who you are to get to the right place. So search and effective search actually becomes a really important piece of a university website. So, here's a simple example of, how one of our customers has deployed search. You could see the search box front and center on their website, and, you could type in a search query, and it actually even ties into the directory results. So if you type in a name, you actually get the directory results information on the right-hand side. This is kind of similar to how we were on Google.com giving you movie results or weather maps through a simple search query. So instead of having to go into a separate application, the search engine is being proactive to bring that information to you. But you can see kind of the ease with which different search options are implemented, and search can really become the primary interface. So the product that we have that supports this is called the Google Search Appliance, and it really looks like this yellow box. Believe it or not, Google actually sells hardware, and this yellow box actually packs all of the hardware, all of the software, which includes all of the specific search algorithms that have been specifically enhanced for both websites and internal content, and it has a lot of built-in security. So users can basically securely access any of the information in your university, whether it's on websites, whether it's in your intranets. All of the popular databases are supported, and even business applications. If you have ERP systems or CRM systems internally, those can be tapped into. And if you have content management systems, the search appliance can search all of that as well. Here's some simple examples of how you can enhance this. So, we have a Blackboard one-box module where, if a university wants to, you can actually type in a specific, course number or course module, and it will actually, search the Blackboard repository and bring back specific results from the Blackboard application. Another one of our customers actually deployed the course finder on their website, so students could come in and simply type a course name and get all of the latest and greatest information. Back when I was a student, we used to have these really thick course catalogs. I would have loved to have something like this to find information, but I guess in the digital age, these things do make a lot of sense. And you can see the search results on the course finder. It looks very much like the Google.com search results, except it's customized for the look and feel of the specific university, and the students can actually get the exact information they need right then and there. Another example of how you could use search is internally in your help desk. One of our customers actually deployed search against their help desk knowledge base, and you could see that the search box is right there. So instead of a student calling the IT help desk and saying, hey, how do I set up a secondary email account, or how do I do this, a lot of students just go there and do a quick search. It searches the knowledge base, and they get the results right then and there. So this saves the university a lot of costs in terms of actually staffing the help center and answering a lot of phone calls for the students, since a lot of it can be done directly on the web. So I just wanted to give you a brief touch of what the Google Search Appliance does and some examples of how it works. With that, I'm happy to introduce Matt Hall from Vanderbilt University, and Vanderbilt has deployed both Google Apps as well as the Google Search Appliance. So Matt can give you a real good perspective on, what it's meant for them. Matt?
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here. First of all, I come from, before I came to Vanderbilt, I was in an investment bank at Bank of America for over a decade, and I'm not sure what our audience composition is. I'm sure we have CIOs, IT directors, people from student life, various segments across the higher ed community, and I want to talk a little bit about how each of you have a stake in how you go forward with Google Apps and the Google Search Appliance. Let me tell you a little bit about Vanderbilt. I arrived in 2004. It was a very different organization. It's located in Nashville, Tennessee, one of the country's top universities, and it's a private research university with a major medical center. This is an academic medical center. So we have 900-bed hospital. We have over 234 buildings, 18 million square feet of commercial real estate. At any given time on our network, we're seeing around 60,000 IP devices attached to it. So we see people that are communicating. I think this is also very important to the future of Google. They're communicating not only when they're tethered, but the wireless and the mobility is of utmost importance to our campus. It's also important not only to teaching and learning and collaboration, but it's going to be very important to the way in which we render clinical care in future. We have 6,500 undergraduates and 5,300 graduate and professional students, and we're a very large employer. We're right around 3,000 faculty and 21,500 staff. So we're a major contributor to the economy in Middle Tennessee. And we're right around $3.2 billion a year on the top line of our organization. We have a medical school, a business school, a law school, nursing school. So we have your professional schools, and we have your traditional undergraduate and graduate school educations, which you may be familiar with. Vanderbilt is a residential experience. The whole idea is, and this is part of the partitioning of the audience, some of you may be from state schools, some of you may be from a community college, some of you may be from comparably situated institutions such as Vanderbilt with the residential experience that we have, but our students, our undergraduates in particular, live on campus. So let me tell you a little bit about the Google context, and I'm going to push a slide, Life Before Google. When I arrived at Vanderbilt from Bank of America in 2004, there were 100, and this may be similar to what some of you experience today, there were 147 electronic messaging systems in various states of ownership, decay, and operational excellence, shall we say. We had a large installation in the medical center. We had many dispersed electronic messaging systems throughout the undergraduate, graduate, professional space. Central IT had a messaging system. And one of the things I recognized comparing our infrastructure at Bank of America to the infrastructure I found at Vanderbilt, it was at risk. My first week on the job at Vanderbilt, I had an 18-hour email outage. And it was really horrid to find the state of affairs that I landed in. I called the guys at the bank. I said, "Is this really possible?" At the time, in the 21st century, that we could be in this state, and it was. And it was nothing malicious. It was just the nature of higher ed in the past was that people grew up in a very decentralized manner. And so what we wanted to do when I was hired in was to professionalize the central IT functions. It's not just an organic. We had a very good group of people who were working in the institution and working their best, but we wanted to do professional practice, idle practice, bring more things to the center, and really have a look at what the institution needs to conduct its mission effectively. And the first part of that was our basic electronic messaging and collaboration. So we looked at our messaging system. We looked at our messaging system. We found that both systems were based upon legacy open source systems, and they lacked a lot of features. I mean, everybody gets hung up around the storage side of the equation, but that's really not the issue. It's speed, it's reliability, it's integrated calendaring, and it's availability. People really need the electronic messaging to be there when they need it. And so that messaging side of the equation was woeful. And to short circuit the story behind that, by the time we started talking to Google and one of its major competitors in 2005, I said, we've got to get this under control. And to get it under control, we did a business assessment that said on the undergraduate and the academic side of the house for faculty, students, we would have to spend several $1 million. So what we wanted to do was partition out the undergraduates and say, how do we meet their needs, and how can we give them a better collaborative experience? So we started talking to several firms, Google preeminent amongst them, and we said, what can you do for us? Relative to what we could provision ourselves, it was going to cost us around $750,000 to $1 million just to upgrade storage to give comparable service. At the time, it was really a gig was our target in terms of the storage capabilities for Google Mail. And we felt that if we could sign a contract with Google, prove to people that Google is a brand that you can trust. I mean, we take something for granted in 2010 that you won't have to overcome that we had to go through in 04, 05, and 06 was, what is a search firm doing in the email business? Now, we're way past that, and we know that Google Apps is something that's more fundamentally important to the way we collaborate, we live at Vanderbilt, and the way we work today. So we took that investment profile and said $750,000 or Google, and it became a very clear imperative that we're going to go Google, and we're going to shut down our legacy mail infrastructure, starting with the undergraduates. We felt the undergraduates were a good place to start, so we had to form a committee that involved our legal counsel, our student life organization, and several various IT leaders throughout the organization, because I think some of you may face a broad base of folks involved in IT, and we want to make sure that all your constituencies are covered. And at the time, we also brought in the Vice Chancellor for Public Affairs, Mike Schoenfeld, and that's occupied by a person named Beth Fortune today, and we brought them together and said, can we do this? What are the issues? And we had a couple things that we had to iron out. One was, and I'm not sure how each of you will do this in your respective organizations, but we have something called the Honor Council. We have e-discovery requests. We have our legal, our HR people, because sometimes students are workers and you have this division of, well, what's the custodial obligation? Vanderbilt, with Google partnerships, retains custody of the messaging. Our identity management systems integrate very nicely. I mean, we were up almost immediately. So the committee really spent a year vetting the issues. Google was very patient working with us, as I know they will be with you. And they just had answers to all of the questions we had. And I think they're going to be able to sell you the story that they've done this successfully many, many times before. Because at the time, only a few institutions had done it when we started the journey. But today, you've got a lot of success stories. So you're going to hear some roadblocks around, is it secure? Yes, it's secure. We find for the purposes of our undergraduates, it's more than sufficient. And I know that as we look at it across the institution in academic medicine, it's going to be a bigger issue around security. I feel very comfortable saying that Google will make it happen for you there. The big thing is, how do you monetize it going forward? So you've got this big cost savings at the front of the change, which was $750,000 or $1 million, just to give people a service that they would like. It's the ongoing cost. Now, so far, we went full live in 2009 October, and we had been running a pilot since 2008. The savings have been about $173,000 a year, plus the initial cost avoidance of $750,000, because one of the things you're able to do is you're able to pull machines out of your data center, and that data center space is very precious. So when you look at your business case, look at the depreciation of the equipment, look at the space it occupies, look at the maintenance it takes up, and you're going to be able to make a very compelling business case to your CFO or your folks who are in administration. Let me tell you a little bit about the Google Search Appliance and how we came to that decision. And let me see if I can advance these slides, guys. I apologize on my deficiency on the slides here, so bear with me a moment. There we go. Let me push you right to the Google Search Appliance. We had another firm that was charging us what I consider to be an outrageous licensing fee. We had a firm that really was not very flexible, and the search results that were coming back were fairly inferior. So what we decided to do was, hey, let's look around the market and who has the best search brand in the industry, and clearly that's Google. And I was looking at some of our stats from today, and so that we get a sense, I'm going to pop over to an email from this. So what are stats for today? So over a 24-hour period, the Google Search Appliance at Vanderbilt searched URLs to the tune of 5.25 million. They looked up and served up searching requests and results of over 951,000 documents. And as you add content to your domain or to the area that's under management from Google, they indexed 139 documents yesterday, and we're getting queries to the point of 60, 70, 80 queries a minute, and the Google Search Appliance is providing very accurate results at a very high rate with small latency. And, you know, we deployed that in 2009, and it's excellent, and Gartner and all the other firms that we use to evaluate third-party technologies clearly identifies Google as the leader in this space. And I tell you, from an appliance perspective, we don't want to have to do systems administration. We want to plug it in, point it at our website, point it at some other things that we have operating on it, and we want to let it go. And more importantly, our public affairs personnel manage the configuration and optimize the searches, and those of us in IT, we sort of manage it for them, look after break fix, and maintain high availability. We've had virtually 100% availability. The only time it goes down is if we were to cut the network to it. Google has a very high availability in the search appliance space, so I couldn't be more pleased there. And it's, again, what we did at Vanderbilt, and this is why the same theme went forward in Google Apps. We wanted to find the best in class, which in both cases features, functionality, and price was Google. We wanted to start small with a small group of people. We would have a pilot, and then we would move forward, and Google passes the test every time. So on both those accounts, whether it's Google Apps or on the search appliance, you're finding a very excellent experience in both cases. Let me tell you a little bit more on this point on the next slide that I've already mentioned $750,000 savings, and there's a 584 three-year savings as well, which we've realized $179,000 this year. A lot of resources can be redirected, and I can tell you this other bullet point here on student satisfaction, our student government has been actively involved in this conversation since 2007. And matter of fact, a lot of the student government platforms and advocacy centers around Google, they've really made it their own. They're using apps in very creative ways with the calendaring system, with their mobility devices. The integration with mobility is fantastic, and the students are really leveraging it in their student life and bringing people together and collaborating. I've used Google Docs in my classes, both in my computer science teaching and in my first-year writing seminar that I teach with the chairman of the English department here. It's been a really good experience. Google's constantly innovating. I can't remember if it was Stephen or Vijay who was talking about the iterative development that Google has. This is a very positive thing for your institution. They are constantly innovating. Things like Buzz, things like Google Wave have been instrumental in our educational process. And in my computer science course, I've been using Google very successfully with Google Wave, which is a persistent instant messaging experience, and I'm doing it a disservice by just characterizing it as that, because it was fundamental to the way we operated the class. And the student engagement was there, and this goes to this point about student satisfaction. It is greatly enhancing our students' ability to collaborate with one another, to engage faculty, and it's really an interesting phenomenon on campus. When we started thinking just as email and search, Google's so much more, and we're starting to see it permeate the lives of a lot of our undergraduate students. So it really is an integral part of the way we do our life on campus. In terms of the web experience, the search results, the quality of the search results are just so much better. As I mentioned those statistics earlier, to reiterate, I mean, right now it's 951,000 documents, over 5.2 million URLs that are being indexed. The previous search appliances just could not do what Google needs it to do. And as we continue to grow at a rate of 100 to 200 documents a day, Google's able to keep up, and it's able to scan and index and provide quality searches. So there's not erroneous results coming back when you type something in. People are getting a very high quality experience because that content is just phenomenal. So let me offer you this. I'm not sure. Let me check the next slide, make sure I'm not missing anything. I'll back up to this one. On my summing up here for you, so I can get to questions. I know I've been rushing through this because I've heard there's a lot of questions. When you approach your decisioning around Google Apps, the key to your success is a couple things. Have a solid business case. What are you paying today? What are your imminent replacement costs? What are your depreciation of your assets or your lease costs or whatever service fees you're paying today to outsource firms? How much space does it take up? So these are these fundamental depreciation, life cycle management, technical obsolescence discussions that you need to have, and those are important and they're very simple. And if you send me an email, matt.hall@vanderbilt.edu, I can give you more detail about that. That's the business thing. That's what you want to deal with your administrators and your CFO. When you're dealing with your student community, and let's just take the student life community, their interest is in quality of experiences. Can I use it on my mobile devices? Can I get it on a Mac and a PC? Can I get it on an iPad? Can I get it on an iPhone? And the answer, of course, to all those questions is yes. Because the Google experience crosses platforms. Whether it's a mobile platform, whether you're on their Android phones or on an iPhone, you get very good access to Google Calendaring and the Google Messaging and Google Apps. So it's important that the quality, we understand that the students are focused on the quality of experience, capabilities, and you're going to see as you open up Google services such as groups and sites that there's going to be some significant uptake along with calendaring, that they're going to use this in unique and interesting ways. And after and I'll have the Googlers explain this to you, after a /A collapse, they're collapsing the consumer and the EDU application base together, we're going to have a myriad of services in the Google education space, and Miriam and the company will have to talk a little bit about what that means in Google speak. But I can tell you the legal piece and the security piece is going to be a broader concern. How do you do e-discovery? How do you deal with subpoenas? Those sort of things are going to be a part of your constituency is going to want to know about that. Make sure that you have an acceptable use policy that's updated for the Web 2.0 world. There are things in your institution's custody. There are things out of your custody. make sure that you have appropriate conversations and policies governing how people use services with Google, because there are ways to do e-discovery and subpoenas and manage all the things you need to do when you're managing an application platform that Google facilitates very nicely through automated APIs and through consoles. And one of the things that I'll tell you right now, I'm looking at my Google console. We have about 7,509 users. At any given time, there's 6,212 have used the service over the last week, and it's a very actively used service. So it's not going to lie fallow. It's going to be used by your community, and I can tell you that everybody's active on it. So on the Google Search Appliance, it should be a very easy conversation, because you buy it, you rack it, you stack it, you point it, and you go, and it's so simple to use. You really don't have a headache with it, and we've been extraordinarily pleased. What we did in the Google Appliance side is our web community. We have a large community at Vanderbilt called Web Spiders. We really brought the web community, web development community into the discussion so that our public affairs people could say, hey, why don't you publish your web content in a way that works optimally, and I'm not going to be able to speak to how, but again, send me an email and I can get you in touch with the people on the technical optimization. How you optimize your content to maximize your search results accuracy, and Google makes that so easy. So the results are just outstanding. So on those 2 points, do it in an iterative way is what we did. We brought in a little bit at a time, and then October 2009, after a 2-year pilot, we made it mandatory for all undergraduates. In the fall, we're going to have a discussion after the apps domain collapse, and again, Googlers will explain that to you. We're going to have a discussion about bringing Google across the board to faculty, staff, and students relative to other competitors in the marketplace and other modes of collaboration. We are undertaking a next-generation architecture for networking, which is the next-gen networks focusing on real-time media, video, unified collaboration. We have to bring our telephony, our video, our web conferencing together. That's got to be part of the conversation when you tee up your discussions around Google as well, how your institution wants to do that, particularly if you're in an academic medical environment. You also have regulatory concerns. So there's a lot of that discussion. I'll have that decision by the end of the year through a lot of community involvement, but it's been a long, iterative process that we started in 2005, and I couldn't be more pleased with Google's performance across the board. They've been a major impact to Vanderbilt. They've really taken and reforged the competition and made their competition much more attentive to our needs and much more functional in a way that people want to do their work. And Linda, I'll turn it back over to you and see unless I've missed something in my ramblings.
Thank you, Matt. Great job with that. Really interesting presentation. Let me push this last slide here because I really like this sign that you've got on your slide. So we'll move into the Q&A portion of the presentation now and grab some of these very good questions coming in from the audience. While we're starting that, let me push out a link to the audience. Here's a quick survey. If you can take a moment to click on that and give us some feedback on the presentation, we'd appreciate that. And do keep sending your questions over. You type them into the chat area there on your console, hit submit, and we'll see them on our console shortly. Let me start here with a question for the Google folks to give Matt a chance to catch his breath. Sorry, questions are really coming in. Vijay, maybe you can answer this one. You talked about 8 million users, I think. The question is, how many schools are actually using Google Apps for education?
Actually, I'll hand that over to Stephen because that's more of his domain.
Sure. So I'm actually on the Google Apps Education team. We do have 8 million users. That includes thousands of universities as well as thousands of K through 12 schools. We don't have the exact number because schools do sign up, but kind of sign up without necessarily having to notify us. So it's thousands and thousands of schools.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you. Now here's a good question for you. You talked about the selection process when you decided to go with Google. Did you also look at Microsoft's Live at EDU product is the question.
Yeah, let me answer that in 2 parts. We at the time, I love my colleagues at Microsoft. At the time, they weren't as flexible as they are now. The decision in 2005 and 06 when we started our prototyping and getting ready for our federated identity with Google, because you have to pass your identity across to Google. One point was at the time I made the decision was you could not have vanderbilt.edu. It had to be the live.vanderbilt.edu. And that was a big issue with our alums and with our folks at Vanderbilt because they wanted to preserve vanderbilt.edu. So we did look at both. It's a different world today. We will be implementing opt-in live at edu here at Vanderbilt very soon, and we'll see what the adoption rates. People are going to be able to choose Google or live at edu, so we're offering both, and we'll see what happens. But I think the real contest at the time in '05, they were in very different places. The level of flexibility wasn't there from Microsoft that is there today, and I think Google's really pressed on Microsoft to make some changes, so we see a much more competitive landscape.
Interesting. So you'll be offering them both.
That's correct. I think you'll find that's pretty common in many institutions as well today. But what we've seen, though, in other institutions that I've talked to other CIOs, the Google adoption rates when you're offering opt-in tend to outpace the live at edu when they're stacked side by side.
Here's a good question that came in on security. I'm going to hand this to our Google speakers. Universities, of course, are very concerned about security and privacy, student data, health information, and so forth. How does Google respond to concerns about privacy? Vijay or Stephen?
Sure, I can take that. So Google definitely takes privacy and security very, very, very seriously. The way the Google file system is built, your data is actually secure in data servers, basically spread across different data servers. We also have a very detailed privacy and security FAQ, as well as a security white paper that I'm sure we can kind of find some way to post online later. But if you do a quick Google search for them, you can search privacy and security Google Apps.
Okay, great, thanks. A question for you, Matt, and you talked a little bit about support issues and how Google has made those easier. Has moving Vanderbilt students to Google had any effect on your FTE staffing levels, particularly for email support there at Vanderbilt?
We reduced one FTE as a result of the movement to Google. And I got to tell you, support calls are basically non-existent. If you look at the Google dashboard for apps, look at our control panel, the high levels of availability really mean we don't have much support, so the support is almost a non-issue in terms of even help desk calls. The only thing I ever get is and the IT administrators, you'll appreciate this, is the end of semester, the mail system ate my homework conversation, which, usually isn't the case.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Here's an interesting question, a bit of a philosophical one. This attendee says, it seems that you're saying that the sheer size of computing at universities makes it difficult to support IT needs through the university. It's just difficult to support the scale and level of effort. Matt, let me ask you about that and then ask Vijay and Stephen as well to respond. But to finish the question, is this really the state of affairs today? And are Google and players like that, I assume they're referring to players in the cloud, for example, the option for organizations today?
To your latter question, yeah, I believe they are, and here's the reason. We've got, in our informatics, ITS, and MIS organizations, there's a finite amount of staff with an infinite amount of demands. And the philosophy, I work for a guy named Bill Stead in the medical center, and he's essentially our de facto chief information officer across the institution. And really the philosophy that we've agreed upon is that anything that could be in the cloud should be in the cloud. And Google has scale and skill and energies that we can't bring to bear because we would like to focus our energies on clinical innovation, focusing on learning, focusing on investing in our network and network security. By taking this out of my hands, I really get to redirect a very precious and finite resource and skill set of a great group of people towards more institutionally focused learning, clinical care, mission-focused activities, and research in particular requires a different level of support today. So if I don't have to have people distracted, it's not that we can't deal with the scale. I mean, we can, but Google allows us to draw our attention elsewhere. And I think that's an important thing because at Central IT in particular, we're trying to serve many, many constituencies. Google, we spent years in Central IT trying to get people to bring things to the center. Well, Google's allowing us to take something to the mother of all centers up at Google because we don't have to fool with it anymore. This allows us to redirect our attention.
That's a great answer, very hands-on answer. Vijay, did you have anything to add to that in terms of cloud computing and that concept for universities and colleges?
Well, I'll actually let Stephen go first, and then I'll add in a bit on the search appliance philosophy.
So in terms of, I would say, schools, I definitely think the general trend is that schools are moving to cloud computing because simply of the server cost and not really being able to offer all different applications as well as the storage size that Google is able to offer. I can't speak specifically for schools because I don't, haven't been on that side, but I would definitely say that is a trend for schools to be moving toward third-party hosted cloud computing services.
Yeah, and just to build on that, I think a broader philosophy here at Google is that, whatever we do, we want to make sure that it minimizes the, FTE impact at our customers and, as Matt was talking about, reducing that FTE impact. I think that's a broader philosophy about ease of maintenance of our solutions. So even with the Google Search Appliance, it's one of those things where, since we pack all of the software and hardware, everything into one simple box, once it's deployed, it's really, really easy to maintain. And a lot of our customers notice an FTE reduction in terms of maintenance, even with the Google Search Appliance, because once it's deployed, it pretty much runs itself. It need a little bit of tweaking every now and then, but for the most part, it runs itself.
Let me kind of jump in here on this because there's a lot of IT people in higher ed that may be listening to this.
Sure.
When you hear FTE reduction, guys, don't think that you're going to see a large elimination of jobs. I mean, we're in a cost-contained, drive costs down world. Think of it this way. You get to redirect your labor. A lot of you're going to talk to your CFOs and your vice chancellors for administration and so forth. We have an immense amount of need. So it's really not about just driving FTE count down and i.e. job loss in plain speak. It's about taking the good people we have and putting them to a more optimized purpose. Google frees you up. They're not your competitor. They're going to help you in this race. So I want you to keep a good comparison. FTE reduction means FTE redirection to more important things that you're dealing with, like security, research, and so forth.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you.
I also want to add one last point. The Campus Computing Survey, or the most recent Campus Computing Survey, actually states that 80% of schools are actually moving to the cloud, and 60% of them actually choose Google.
All right, thank you. Quick question for the Google folks. You support Blackboard. Do you also support Moodle?
Yeah, so I think that's a good example, and I'll broaden that question to other systems in general that EDUs have. So the Blackboard example I showed up there was the search appliance actually searching, tapping into Blackboard and bringing back search results. So that's an example of what we call a one-box technology, where one box is really a feature of the Google Search Appliance. And just like you got, those weather charts on Google.com, Google.com was tapping into a weather directory in real time, or a weather database in real time, and bringing back search results. Well, that's the same thing that the Google Search Appliance does with Blackboard. It taps into it and it brings back the search results in real time. And so you could basically set up a one-box module for any other information system that you want. Some of our one-box modules, like Blackboard, are already pre-configured and available for download on our website. Others, for other systems, you might have to develop them on your own. But developing a one-box module, is a matter of a couple of weeks. It's not, a strenuous development effort. And so if you have any proprietary systems or even other common systems, but we don't have a one-box module yet, then you can develop your own and search that. And it's really as simple as kind of doing a real-time query into it and bringing back search results.
Okay. Thank you. A couple very specific questions here for Matt. Matt, how are students integrated with faculty and staff on the Exchange system? Do staff, can students see staff email addresses and so forth, I think is part of the question.
The answer is yes. Matter of fact, I've got to let the Google people answer the technical details. We are going to have a directory integration that's a universal directory integration coming up. But, yeah, there's no bridge of collaboration between the two of them that can't be crossed. What we have is the undergraduates on Google, and then faculty, staff, and our clinical practices throughout the institution are on Exchange 2007, and there's been no real problem sending messaging, doing calendaring. And we do a lot. We encourage people to do the Google Sync. if they have multiple accounts, they can count their Exchange and their Google calendars together.
Are you considering moving those folks over to Google, or why or why not?
That'll be part of the conversation in the fall. We'll make a decision as to if we can move faculty, the clinicians, and others over to Google Enterprise or Microsoft's vPods. It's going to be two things we're examining, because graduate students are not on our Google platform yet, and that's going to be a big part of our discussion. And I tell you, from the Google perspective, what we're working on with Miriam and others is making sure that we understand all the regulatory and security issues in the academic medical space before we proceed.
Right. Another question, Matt. What does Vanderbilt use for its Identity Vault?
We use Sun Identity Manager. We use LDAP and Active Directory.
Okay. Thank you. More general question here for our Google speakers. Is the Google Mini Search a good alternative to the Google Search Appliance for initial entry into university search?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the Google Mini, it's basically a small business or small organization version of the Google Search Appliance. It's very low cost, but it's also light on features. So, yes, some universities do use the Google Mini. They generally use it if they're only searching plain websites without any kind of special features like the Blackboard or any other special connectors to tap into other repositories. And they also use it if they have a low number of pages. So the Mini starts at 50,000 pages, as opposed to the Google Search Appliance that starts at 500,000 pages. So, when, Matt talked about Vanderbilt's needs for, 4 million web pages, certainly, the Mini wouldn't support that kind of volume, and, Vanderbilt definitely needed the Google Search Appliance. But if you're a small university and you have a small number of web pages, certainly give the Mini a shot. You can get started on, what it's like to have one of these appliances. And, as you like it and you wanted to add more repositories at the back end, you can always upgrade to the Google Search Appliance.
Okay. Thank you. Here's an interesting question, again, for Vijay or Stephen from Google. Once anonymized, does Google reserve the right to mine stored customer data? Can the no data mining option be explicitly written into the contract?
So it really depends on, I guess it really depends on what the person means by data mining. So we do need to be able to search the data so that you can use some of the services, such as search. We don't sell your data to third-party services. We're not looking for any advertising, any of those things. And it's very explicit in our security and privacy FAQ.
Okay. Thank you. Let me see. A lot of questions coming in here. Here's an interesting one. This attendee says, we use Exchange and we live by our tasks and calendar functions for our faculty and staff. How does Google Apps handle this integration? Matt, can you take that first in terms of what you're doing?
Yeah, you're going to have a very similar experience from your Exchange calendar. Mm-hmm. The problem is going to be when you're in mixed mode. If you're using Google plus Exchange, there's not a really good bridge in terms of availability. What I've done is I've synced my Exchange to my Google, so I'm getting the best of both worlds, and it forges that bridge. But if you were to go all Google, you're going to have the similar experience in terms of directory collaboration, the ability to schedule resources and people.
Okay, thank you. Another question for you, Matt, and that is, in terms of support, when there's a Google support issue, does that go directly to Google, or is it first vetted through your help desk?
We first take it in our help desk, and then if we find that it's something at Google, which, to be quite candid, has not happened yet, mm-hmm. We would go up to Google support. That we've rarely had any problems that we couldn't deal with. It's usually on our end, not on Google's end in any case. Okay.
Back to Stephen, I think, with Google with this one. Someone's asking about service level agreement, the contract, I think, regarding doing business with someone in the cloud. How do you validate your SLA to the end user is the question. How do you ensure proper end user quality of experience when you're dealing with a product in the cloud?
So we do guarantee 99.9% SLA. You can also look at our dashboard for the service times of all of our different applications. And the same SLA that we have for the Google Apps Education Edition, we also have for the Premier side. So it's the same SLA.
Oh, okay. Here's an interesting question. Someone is switching over from Exchange to Google Apps right now, and they say right now we're in the testing phase. What's the best way to transfer over email on each machine into Google Apps? We're using the Google Email Uploader, but it takes hours. This may cause massive frustration. Any suggestions? Matt, can you address that from your experience?
We did not convert anybody from Exchange to Gmail, so I can't say, but we have some plans in place. Part of it is if you're going to continue to run a client, you can retain your local mail store locally and then let your end users do the process themselves. If you're going to provide an all-singing, all-dancing solution, that Google Exchange Uploader is the only thing I know in town. There's a couple other firms that we've looked at, but we're going to run it. The volume of data transmission is going to be constrained by your storage, by the clients that are containing the mail stores. So there's a lot of variability there that's harder to pin down the migration rates. It's just something you've got to work through.
Stephen or Vijay, anything to add to that?
In terms of Exchange, we actually do have a Google Apps Microsoft Migration Exchange tool. I'm not sure if that's the tool the question poser is using, but that would be the tool recommended to migrate over the data from Exchange.
Okay, so there is a tool.
There is a tool, and this tool was, just a couple of months old. So if you haven't checked out the tool recently, if you're using an older tool, certainly come back to our website and look for the Google Apps Migration tool because there's been some recent enhancements, and it's going to work much better for you.
Okay. Specific question for the Google speakers again, and that is, who can assist me in registering for Google Apps Education for education? I wish to apply as a K-12 school. Where should they go?
I can take that. So you can actually register online if you go to www.google.com/a/edu.
Okay. It's fairly simple. Matt, a question for you. In moving to Google Apps, did you see any impact on bandwidth?
No, not at all. It was inconsequential. I've got a gigabit per second I1 connection and 10 gig I2, so no, it's not really an uptick at all.
Okay. And I think we have time maybe for one more question. A quick question here for Matt. Do you use any of Google's email archiving tools like Postini, and if so, are you satisfied with them? What's your feedback there?
Was that for me, Linda?
Yeah, Matt, can you take that?
We haven't used Postini. Let me tell you where we are. We have an enterprise solution from Xantaz at the medical center. We're carrying that forward. I was out at Google with Miriam and company, I guess, 2 weeks ago. Postini didn't have all the archiving capability that we need in the academic medical side, but I think it's very sufficient for just really archive extension right now. So we're not planning on moving to Postini in the near future, but we're looking at it a 2 to 4 year period.
Okay. And on that note, we're just about out of time here. Great questions, everyone. Thank you very much. And to our speakers as well, do go ahead and continue to send your questions over. If you still have some that we haven't gotten to, we are going to get answers to you via email after the event. So hang on. Once again, let me thank our speakers today. That was Matt Hall from Vanderbilt University, along with Stephen Fang from Google and Vijay Koduri from Google. Big thank you to all of them. Also, our appreciation to Google for sponsoring today's event and allowing us to bring it to you free of charge. Again, we have been recording this event, and it will be available for on-demand viewing within the next 24 hours. We'll send to each of you an email as a registered attendee, and you can view that archive or share the link with your colleagues. If you'd like additional information about this or other campus technology webcasts, you can contact our e-content producer, Kanoi Namahoy, at the email address there on your screen. And on that note, thank you very much for attending. This concludes today's presentation.